Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. Hello and welcome to Give Life. I am your host, meek, mild-mannered Paul Abramson. Broadcasting to you from my multi-trillion-dollar recording studio. And this is episode 12. Today I want to talk about Plato's Republic, ghosts, and near-death experiences, NDE, near-death experiences. And these are, well, Plato's Republic isn't such a hard topic, but ghosts and NDEs are. Partially, this is an appeal to atheists, to anti-theists, to quote-unquote intellectuals who are above us believers. Oh, science is the highest virtue for me or something. Okay, well, science is something that's limited to our dimensions, the four dimensions that we are in: width, breadth, height, and time. And so that's comfortable for us. It's predictable. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So we like that. The idea of a spirit world or of other dimensions is pretty threatening, actually, because it means we're not in control. Well, I would contend that down through time and all around the world, there is strong evidence we're not in control. We're above the animals. Okay, there's all kinds of animals in the world. You got cows, chickens, crocodiles, goats, crawdads, starfish. I mean, animals includes all kinds of different things, right? In the sea, in the air, on the land. They're also, though, according to multiple religions, not just the world's three monotheistic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, but in other religions, there seem to be good and evil spirits, or ghosts, or good and evil angels out there. And this is something I can't prove, but it appears to be, I would contend, part of the reality around us. Okay, so I want to start with in Plato's Republic. Oh, so Plato lived around 400 BC, roughly 400 BC. He was a junior, maybe 25 years younger than Socrates. Socrates was tried and killed in, if I recall correctly, 399 BC, so about 400 BC. Plato was about 27, 28, I think, at that time. He was going to go into politics, but when Socrates was forced to kill himself drinking a drink that had hemlock in it, he decided to go into philosophy instead. And we, all around the world, ever since then, for the last over 2,000 years, are the beneficiaries of Plato's writings. So this is just one published version. There's lots of published versions of his works out there. It's free on the internet. It's Plato's Republic. It's just a well-known classic. Now, and so it's just well known. Okay. So I want to draw from that, and I am not an expert. I'm not a philosopher. I've mentioned that before. I'm not a scientist. I'm not officially a historian. I'm a guy who's 66 years old, I'm an American, live in Indiana. I've lived in Europe for 3 years, lived in Japan for 5 years. I've traveled, a couple dozen countries, been on archaeological digs, paleontological digs, geological digs. You don't dig that much on geology, which is fortunate. The layers can get pretty far down, but anyway, I've been blessed to be all kinds of things. I worked for Microsoft, worked for Intel that was in the U.S. Microsoft at their headquarters in Redmond, Intel that was in Oregon, and then I was part of the dot-com boom. I've told you my history before. Okay, but I do want to make an appeal to intellectuals. I lived in Berkeley for 5 years also. That was about 20 years ago. And I try to understand people. When I was in Japan, I actually wrote, so this is going back 30 years, I wrote for, actually I was an editor for a particular magazine. I also wrote for a particular Japanese government newspaper. That was probably about a year and a half. I did a lot of things, and I learned how to query people, how to be a reporter, how to interview. And so I've used that in life, in asking questions of people, trying to understand how someone thinks. And that's a good way of showing respect to someone. Jesus did that a lot. If you notice, if you look in the Gospels, you see that Jesus often asked a question, and then he would give his answer. And so when I lived in Berkeley, I'm a Bible-believing Christian, very conservative, but I consider myself very tolerant or respectful. I want to be respectful of the person, even if I strongly disagree with their belief system. If it's a Hindu or an atheist or a Muslim, can't we find things in common? Can't we discuss things? Can't we learn from each other at least a little bit? When someone's over 30 years old, 30, 35, 40 years old, they have learned a little bit about the world, and it's kind of like you got to get to that age for most people before you can even start questioning your own belief system, what you grew up with, why you believe what you do. Okay, I'm getting way off subject here. I need to get into Plato's Republic. I was not raised in a Christian home, but I became a Christian when I was in junior high school. It was my best friend's mother who led me to the Lord. And then I became a Christian and started going to different churches. That was in Seattle. That was mostly where I grew up, was Seattle. And anyway, okay, I'm talking too much about this. Let's talk about Plato's Republic. Okay, so that's who I am and how I approach this, is that I see myself as a fellow learner. Is that fair? As a learner? The Socratic Method was one where, which Plato then tries to not imitate, tries to use as a framework, is one of asking questions and then leading down a path and trying to figure out logical conclusions, okay? So we're trying to discern, but from what we know, what are things then that we can conclude, okay? Is that fair? Okay, so in Plato's Republic, chapter 7, it's got 10 books, 10 chapters within it. I think they're called books here. Hold on here. Book. Okay, so book 7 is the story of Plato's cave. Now, this is a famous story. If you've ever taken philosophy class, or even on a casual, you've learned about Plato's cave. So here's the setup. There is a cave with, okay, so this is a reality that is proposed, okay? There is a cave where these people are in. They are chained in there. They cannot move. They can't escape from there. It's pretty dark, but there's some light. There's flames behind them. There's a wall that they can't see over, but there's a fire behind them. In other words, there's light behind them. And the only way they can see is forward, so the light's behind them. And someone evidently puts up images between the flame and the far wall. So behind them, puts up like a bunny. You ever seen people do that with a flashlight at night? You're in a camping trip or something, and they'll go the bunny rabbit and the fox and the bat or something. Here's the bat flying around. Here's the bunny rabbit hopping around. Have you ever seen that? So they'll have I can't do it here, there's too much light. But you've got, okay, so the shadow on the wall is what you're looking at, and the shadow imitates different things, okay? You're familiar with that. Okay, so I'll get some pictures. I'll look online and find pictures to show you, just in case you've never seen that kind of thing before. I'm assuming most people have it. Anyway, this is their only reality. Okay, so they're chained in this cave. They've grown up there. Between themselves, they can discuss things and learn. And they look at the reality. They see the shadows on the far wall, and they go, oh, here comes again and then they give it a name, whatever it is. But it's not the actual thing. It's actually a kind of a representation of a representation, right? Because it's an image that's shown, but it's not, and they're only seeing the shadow of it. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so now, one day, one of the men is able to escape there. He's able to get out. he goes out in the real world, and at first he can't see because it's too light. It's too bright. He can't. And there's the sun, and there's these trees, and here's different animals. There's a bird flying around. All these things, and he's able to figure out, oh, why that thing looks kind of like what I know as reality. That thing, which I'll call a tree, looks kind of like that thing of reality of the shadow. I'm using obviously the modern English so you can know what I'm talking about. That in the cave we saw on the wall. Oh, but look, it's bright green and it's got branches and there's birds coming to and from it and it's got fruit on it, whatever the thing is. Or he sees a rabbit and the fur and all the details. Or he sees a fox, or he sees all these different things. Okay, so does that make sense? Now, then he goes back into the cave and he tries to, and he is able to get back to his compatriots and try to describe to them that they're only seeing part of reality. What they are seeing, it seems to be a shadow of the reality that is out there, and they're not being able to see the whole thing, and they think he's crazy. Something's wrong with him. Oh, he gone loco. He's gone crazy. Something is wrong with him. Okay, so you get the idea. Will they accept the reality that he is then telling them of this? Okay, so now it goes on in book 7, which is, 15 pages, 12 pages, something like that. It's not that long, but it's a read. Anyway, he goes on to then contend that philosophy is what brings us out of the darkness of only our senses and the limited reality that we see in this Plato's cave of life that we see. Okay? Now, I hope I'm describing this in a way that makes sense. And it's not my intention to have a end-all be-all of Plato's cave. I'm trying to describe the situation in case for folks who have never heard about it before. So you got a cave where people are at. They have only limited knowledge of what reality is. Don't worry about them eating food, drinking water, and everything else. Okay, combing their hair or whatever. Okay, but the deal is that they're limited to seeing these shadows. They're only representations of representations. And with that, they're trying to discern the reality around them. But one man has gone out. He has come back and says, wait a minute, there's so much more. You don't understand. There's so much more. Okay, so now, in Plato's conclusion, which he's a much smarter guy than me. Okay, that's true. A lot of people are a lot smarter than me. Boy, that's true. But he comes back and tries to describe to them that there's more, and they don't believe him. Why would you believe someone who's gone crazy, right? And of course, Plato's conclusion, as I said just a minute ago, is that philosophy would lead us out. Now, each person can. This has remained famous for over 2,000 years because you can use it. You can think about it, and it provides a good vehicle for us trying to figure out our situation. I have mentioned several times, sorry for raising my voice, this time on earth, this is not life. This is preparation for life, and this is not reality. We know scientifically that every atom is 99.999% empty. Okay, it's actually more than that. I'm rounding down. 99.999% empty. If I said there is nothing here, I am over 99.999% more accurate than saying there's a table here. We are in what appears to be either a hologram or an electrical simulation or something that the creator or creators, he, she, it, or they, seem to have put here. Now, if you're an atheist, atheism starts out with something from nothing for no reason. Okay, I'm sorry, but that's unscientific, isn't it? Right? No, I can't prove to you there's a God. There's many different gods out there. There's many different religions. The God of the Bible basically has said he gives grace to the proud. He gives grace to the proud. Hey, just a second here. Hey, they can hear you out there. He resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Okay? Did I mention I'm working on English? I'm trying to get to where I can use this language somehow. Just a second. Let me take a sip of it. Okay. So I would contend the philosophy and religion Both are important. And being humble, being of a humble spirit, trying to figure out what's going on. If the animals are below us, okay, great, we're above them. But there appears to be, I could be wrong, but there appears to be a whole class or classes, multiple classes of being above us, which are generally called angels. Now, sometimes there are familiar spirits or unclean spirits, as the Bible puts it. And so we only see some of the reality around us. That's what I would contend. So, okay, I hope I've explained. I'm going to come back to Plato's Republic later. Let's see. In the Bible, okay, so I'm relating now to Plato's Republic, the Cape, Plato's Cape. Sorry, I cough sometimes. My throat gets irritated, and then I cough. Okay. 1 Corinthians 13:12 in the New Testament. I've shown you the Bible many times. If this is your first view, this is the Bible's divided into the Old Testament. Where are we at? About here. Old Testament, and then the New Testament. So in what are called the Old Testament and New Testament, the Jews called the Old Testament, they called it Tanakh, and officially they don't recognize the New Testament, although there are rabbinical schools where they do teach some of what Rabbi Jesus teaches, which is because he was a well-known rabbi. Okay, excuse me, I'm getting way off subject. Okay, New Testament. 1 Corinthians 13:12 and 13. This is the very end of what's often called the love chapter in the Bible. Okay? For now we see in a mirror darkly. Okay, I'm relating this to Plato's Cape, excuse me. So this is in the Bible. I consider it kind of a parallel, okay? A little bit. For now we see in a mirror darkly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know even as I am known. It's just very interesting. So in the future there's going to be more. And then a verse I didn't write down is from Hebrews 10 or 11. Hold on. This is just very interesting if we can find it here. Hey, I'm looking for the verse that says, surrounded by a cloud of witnesses, It's at the very beginning of one of the chapters of Hebrews. I thought it was 10 or 11. I'm not finding it. Okay, I'll put it on the screen here. There's a verse that say we're surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, which there's no other verse in the Bible that's like that. It's like, what does that mean? What does that mean? What does that say? Here it is, chapter 12, Hebrews 12, verse 1. King James Version. Okay. Wherefore, seeing we also are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which does so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us. So great a cloud of witnesses. What does that mean? Isn't that interesting? There is not, to my recollection, another Bible verse similar to that. Anyway, it's just interesting. So Plato, from Greek history, Greek tradition, the Bible. Now I want to jump to China. There was a Chinese philosopher, Mencius, 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 also known as Mengzi, Meng space Zi. He wrote a book called the Book of Mencius. Okay, that's what we call it. Okay. And he speaks, the difference between the little man, the inferior man, and the big man. Okay? The little man and the big man. The little man relies on his senses. That's where he's at. He's a carnal man. He's a man of appetites, and that's where he's at. Okay, so the former, the little man, has the little body, which is the five senses, and no more. While the latter, the big man, obeys his big body, which is his soul and reason. Now, that's interesting, isn't it? Now, I know that's not an exact parallel to Plato's Cape, but it's the closest I know of that does show that we have the ability worldwide and down through time. I don't remember when Mencius lived. I think about 1600 years ago, so it would have been 800 years after Plato. I think. Remember, Plato was about 400 BC. Okay, or BCE if you prefer. You like that term better. Anyway, so this idea that we are limited in scope, we only see part of the reality around us, I believe that. I would contend that. And I've been trying to make that, give life. So you can, what's natural for a small child is mine, 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 mine. And to want it for you. And then some adults even they never get past that stage. They want as much as they can get. No, I believe the measure of a man is not how much you can get, it's how much you can give. We need to learn how to become loving, caring, forgiving, patient, gentle, looking for opportunities to try to build others up. I need to do I don't have the books in front of me, they're behind the camera. I need to do one on men and manhood, because it's I think very important. And as America comes crashing down, which is happening all around us. This is being filmed in August of 2023, by the way, just in case. And I'm in episode 12, as I mentioned. My tentative plan is to make 20 episodes to say what I want to say, and then, Lord willing, I'm going to do other things. Okay, I want to move on to ghosts. Okay, there is a Roman poet and playwright who lived, I think, about 200 AD, and I should have put that here in my notes. And he wrote a play called The Ghost. Okay? Now, Mostellaria, Mostellaria. I'll put the word up here. Mostellaria. It's a ancient Roman play. And in the Roman play, the father leaves, the son invites his friends over, they're having a big party. The father comes back from his business trip early, unexpectedly, and oh my goodness, they've got a serious problem. Did you ever see the movie Risky Business? Okay. Anyway, that was, 35, 40 years ago with Tom Cruise as a very young man. But anyway, you've got these, Weekend at Bernie's, that's not like that. I love movies, I mentioned that. My second, episode 2 was about movies and these artificial realities which we create. I consider us part of who and what we are as created in God's image is that we are creative and we can create these different universes or create a book or create now movies in the modern age. Okay, excuse me. Anyway, so all of them hide inside the house. The father's coming home and the servant convinces the father, wait, the house is haunted. There's an evil spirit here of someone who was dead, someone who was killed there, someone who was killed in the house. And so you can't go in. You could be attacked by the ghost. Okay, now I don't want to go into details on the play, except that is the title, and that's what it's. That's part of the plot in the play. Okay, now I find this interesting because in the modern era there are many people who see ghosts. Not every person, but in every culture in the world. Every culture, as far as I know, whether you're in North America, the Native Americans, South America, or modern times, people have seen ghosts. I have a few books on ghosts I'm going to talk about. And in China, I lived in Asia for 5 years, as I mentioned. In Chinese history, in Japanese history, and other countries, people believe in ghosts. Why? If nothing's out there, if they don't exist, if, according to the skeptics, science is all there is, science. Okay, if that's all there is, why is part of the human experience, why are ghosts a part of that? Why do people keep seeing them? And sometimes you'll have a few people, one person may see the ghost and the other two don't. And I mentioned, let's see, I still have this book here. In my last episode, episode 11, How to Become a Satan Worshiper, I talk about paranormal and things like that a little bit. This is a very good book, The Beautiful Side of Evil. It is out of print. Joanna Michelson, I'm in contact with her, and anyway, it is available on Kindle. It is available on Kindle. But if you try to buy this on eBay, it can be 40 or 50 bucks and stuff. Anyway, but it's because it's out of print. It's a very unique book. She got involved in faith healing, thought it was from God. No, it was an evil source for the faith healing. And anyway, I talk about that in the last episode about those things. Okay, so now, so I talk about this Italian play from, 1800 years ago. Now I want to jump to the Bible to show similar things. In the Old Testament, we see Saul, king of Israel, first king, and he seeks out a medium, someone who can call the spirits. And he officially, as king, had made that illegal in Israel. But in 1 Samuel chapter 28, then Saul said to his servant, "Seek me a woman that has a familiar spirit, that I may go to her and inquire of her." And his servant said to him, "Behold, there's a woman that has a familiar spirit at Endor." So she has a unclean spirit or a familiar spirit attached to her. Okay, and this, I know some people are going to laugh. This happens. Okay, I mentioned the witch that I talked to several years ago, and I mentioned there's just different people who are in tune with the spirit world. There's many people who aren't, who don't see it, are completely oblivious to its existence. Science. Okay, and science is important. Science is good. Science teaches us every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Therefore, we have a creator, right? Creator or creators, right? That is the logical first conclusion we should make based on every action. Is if you go back 100 action reactions, then you still have action reaction, right? If you go back 1,000,000 action reactions, there has to be a starting point, an initial cause that is basically separate from this universe, right? Because in this universe, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. You can't escape that, right? The belief that atoms sometimes swerve, okay, that's an old belief, swerving atoms. Okay, let's see, I need to say I'm focused on topic here. I'm trying to appeal to you. On an intellectual level, we're limited how close we can get, particularly someone who, as I said, I'm a Bible-believing Christian, and some of you may scoff at that. Oh, everybody knows that Bible is just filled with all kinds of crazy stories. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. Archaeology in the last 100 years or 130 years keeps confirming the Bible. It keeps confirming it. Names of kings, battles that happened, events that took place. The Bible keeps getting confirmed time and time and time and time again. It keeps getting confirmed. It's a very unique collection of 66 books. Okay, let's see. 1 Samuel 28. There's a Samuel. So this woman then, okay, I'm jumping down to verse 12. So she calls up Samuel. Now, what appears to happen, the Bible doesn't say that it's not Samuel. What it says is the woman called to Samuel. So possibly God allowed this to happen, even though it was a very imperfect method, but she's using a formula. Anyway, verse 12, 1 Samuel 28:12. And when the woman saw Samuel, so Samuel's dead. I'm sorry, the prophet Samuel was dead. So Saul is trying to reach Samuel to get advice. Samuel the prophet. I'm sorry, I didn't give you a good enough lead up to this if you don't know the Bible. So Saul was king. He's trying to figure out something that he wants to do. God's not answering him in other ways, either through dreams or other things. Anyway, so the woman saw Samuel. She cried with a loud voice, and she said to Saul, "Why have you..." Oh, so Saul is wearing a disguise. So he goes to her. He asks for her to bring up his spirit, and of course it's illegal. She can get killed for doing that. But he's in a disguise with two or three servants. And then he calls up Samuel. And so when Samuel arrives, appeared in the spirit of Samuel, she cries with a loud voice, "Why have you deceived me? For you are Saul." And the king said to her, next verse, "Be not afraid, for what did you see?" And the woman said to Saul, "I saw gods ascending out of the earth." And he said to her, "Of what form is he of?" An old man comes up, and he's covered with a mantle. And Saul perceived it was Samuel, and he stooped to the ground and bowed himself. Anyway, so this goes on, and Samuel basically says, "You have sinned by calling me up this way. You're going to die. The price is your life," because he knew he was disobeying God's word, doing this kind of stuff. And that's true today also. Do not get involved in seances. I mentioned this in the last episode, how to become a Satan worshiper. Don't get involved with Ouija boards, with the occult, with psychic stuff. This is very dangerous stuff. If you're using formulas and you're trying to be you in control, the demons will play with you. They will use you like that. We are like freshmen, as I said in the previous episode. Okay, I need to move forward here. Okay, so now, so anyway, basically Saul and his sons die the next day in battle with the Philistines. Okay, Philistine, by the way, I haven't mentioned this before. The word Philistine in the Old Testament in the Bible is the same word as Palestine. It's the Palestine, Palestinians, is the Latinized version of Philistine. I haven't mentioned that previously, but it is true. The Philistines. The battle between the children of Israel and the Philistines, or the Palestinians, is a battle that's been going on for over 4,000 years. It's a very old battle, and it's the contention for the promise, what's called the Promised Land, the Philistines, the Palestinians. It's the same root, but when it became Latinized under the Romans, then rather than Palestine, Palestinians became, rather than Philistines, I am working on English. I'm trying to get where I can use this language. The Philistines became Palestine, the land of Palestine, Palestinians. Okay, so now that happens. Okay, so now one other thing I want to mention here. This is in two other things from the Bible. Matthew 14:26. This is where Jesus is walking on the water. So it's at night. They're in a big storm, and Jesus was not in the boat. They're trying to cross the Sea of Galilee, and they see someone on the water coming towards them, and they cry out. This is Matthew 14:26. They cry out because it's a spirit coming towards them. No, it was Jesus. He immediately says, "Do not be afraid, it's me." And that's where Peter gets out of the boat and says, let me walk on the water too. And he does, but then he sees the water and he falls into it and stuff, and Jesus has to pull him out. Okay, so the idea that, oh, it's a spirit. Okay, so this is then, I'm starting in ghosts. I mentioned this Romans. Now I mentioned the Bible. So this is a Jewish then Christian tradition, okay, that this can happen, that people have seen this. Also, when Jesus was resurrected, after he died, he was buried, 3 days later he rose from the dead. The Bible doesn't give explanation, but it does tell us a couple times here. Here's John 20, verse 19. The same day in the evening, being the first day of the week, when the doors were shut, so they're inside a place, their doors were shut, Jesus came and stood in the middle of them. Okay, the doors are shut, the windows are shut. How did he get there? Okay, so a spiritual being, which Jesus then, when he rose from the dead, he evidently had different properties about himself, about his body. He could still eat. In fact, that's one of the interesting things that down through time theologians, because he'd often say, you have anything to eat? And so, isn't that interesting? I just find that kind of interesting. Also in John 20, verse 26. So after that occasion, 8 days again later, the disciples were within, and Thomas was with them. Then came Jesus, the doors being shut, and stood in the middle and said, "Peace be to you." Okay, so I can't prove that there are ghosts. They are above. I would contend they are above us. The paranormal activity, and that includes UFO activity. The UFOs sometimes completely defy the laws of physics as we understand them, or the UFO will come into view from nowhere, and it can even be seen on radar sometimes. And I don't want to go into any of these things too deeply, but the UFO will come into view, and then it will be gone. Okay, then it disappears. Okay. And it's like, how is this possible? Well, maybe it's a multi-dimensional being or multi-dimensional craft of some kind. This is beyond our understanding. But I do think the UFO phenomenon needs to be dealt with, because Satan wants to be worshipped. He doesn't just want to de-Christianize the world, to pull us away from the God of the Bible. His goal is for him to be worshipped. So pulling us away from the Bible and the truths of Scripture, that's not good enough for him. He wants to be worshipped, that he's the being who's strongest. And hey, he's on our side. That mean old God out there, thou shalt not this, thou shalt not that. Why, he's just trying to keep us from having fun. Something's wrong with him. Okay, so now, stories of ghosts are all over the world and down through time. I got a few books from the library. This is going to be hard to see because it's got a plastic they put on it. It's called Occult Tibet. Okay? Occult Tibet. And so it's on the Eastern tradition, the Asian tradition, in China, in Tibet, in Japan, as I mentioned, Thailand, many countries. When I was in Thailand, did I mention this in a previous episode? It's interesting, you're traveling in the countryside, you'll see a house out in the country, and they have a little house in front of their house. It looks like an oversized birdhouse of some kind. But that actually is a house for the spirits to live in. That's what they contend. They'll actually build these little houses that will be off the ground usually. It's like on a pole or something, so animals can't get into it. But it's for the spirits to live in. And what's interesting is if you improve your house, let's say you make an addition, you're expected to improve the spirit's house also, okay, to make an addition to that for where they live, what their habitation is supposed to be. Okay, I know that sounds crazy to the Western mind, but these spirit beings, this is part of the human tradition. Sometimes they can tell the future, sometimes they can tell someone about a person. They can tell you about a girlfriend or a past event or a past thing, or they'll predict something and stuff like that. Just as Saul, as I mentioned, 1 Samuel 28, I recommend don't do that. Do not get involved in these things. These are evil powers who want to deceive you and then pull you in, pull you downward. This is a book, I got 3 books from the library. History of Ghosts. This is by Peter Ackerman, who I think is the brother of Aykroyd, who's the brother of Dan Aykroyd, the famous actor, and he's out there. He's very well known. And so this is called A History of Ghosts, the true story of seances, mediums, ghosts, and Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters was a famous movie back in the 80s. Very popular movie. Now it's a fictional drama, but within the Aykroyd family, actually, they have a history of persons who have interacted with the spirit world, okay? Anyway, that's their book. And Ghosts and Poltergeists, True Stories from Beyond the Grave, okay? This is a book that's out. There's lots of these books. And places that are haunted, people that get haunted, and things like that. So I contend that the spirit world, I can't prove this scientifically. It's part of the world around us. We need to deal with it. Praying is logical. Every action has an equal opposite reaction. God, who are you? Why did you make me? How do you want me to live? God, is there a purpose to life? These are logical prayers, right? Once we realize we are created, evolution, the belief in something from nothing for no reason, is inherently unscientific. Our modern world is being destroyed. It's being destroyed by lots of things. But one of the things that's really destroying the modern world is this belief in atheism. Okay? So you've got the belief in evolution, which, no, evolution never happened. Sorry, guys. We are created beings. I say this probably every other episode. Will you please spend 1 or 2 hours and watch a creation video? The one I recommend is by Dr. Kent Hovind. It's seminar number 3 of his 7-part series called Dinosaurs in the Bible. In 1 or 2 hours, you can be deprogrammed from believing in evolution. But evolution, then, the belief in evolution is a foundation for atheism. Okay, the idea that we make the rules. We decide what is right and wrong, not God or gods. And then atheism is the foundation for fascism, for communism, for Nazism, and for whatever America's going to fall into as the Nazis and the rhinos continue their takeover in America. And America's end, I fear, will be sooner rather than later. And I'm an American, and it's so deeply troubling to me watching my country go into this insanity that's happening all around me, all around us. Okay. I need to get to the last thing here. NDE, near-death experiences. I know I ramble in these things. I hope that these are interesting that they're edifying, educational, and entertaining, and I hope that you can glean some things out of this. Above, I have wisdom from different parts of the world. Now, actually, did I miss that? Why did I put that in my notes? Oh, it's in the next part. Okay, excuse me. Okay, so I have words of wisdom up above from around the world. And I need to mention, I haven't mentioned this in a few episodes, I disagree with some of these words of wisdom, but they're time-tested. They're from all different cultures. Who am I to say that something is completely wrong? And I believe that we have the spark, the divine spark within us, that people have wisdom in different cultures, in different times in history, and different things. And some of it's been preserved. And if something's been preserved a long time in a culture, well, then it resonates with future generations. We need to remember it if we're wise, if we're going to be wise. Okay, near-death experiences, NDE. This is an interesting field to study. Again, I'm not an expert, just like everything else. One article in Psychiatry magazine, which is a journal, it's a respected journal, but this is an article that came out, almost 30 years ago. No, is that right? Yeah, 1992. Oh my goodness, is that old? Anyway, it's called Distressing Near-Death Experiences by Grayson and Bush. Grayson is spelled Greyson, Grayson and Bush. B-U-S-H. Psychiatry, Volume 25, February of 1992, pages 95 to 110. I'll put it up here so you can see it, if you want to look it up. Now, there's lots of NDEs out there, near-death experiences, and some of them are fake. Some of them are wishful thinking. Some of them are hallucinations. Are all of them? Okay, that's the question. Are all of them? The ones that I find, and I think some people think are most interesting, are ones that children have, where they have limited vocabulary, limited experience, and yet they're trying to describe things that they saw or that happened while they were dead. Okay? So that's one kind, is if a child has it, there's maybe more of a ring of authenticity that this child may be telling the truth. Okay? The other kind that is very interesting is negative near-death experiences, where someone felt sheer terror or horrific pain, and even with creatures laughing at them, biting into them, mocking and belittling them. And this particular journal article from 1992, Distressing Near-Death Experiences, is a collection of these, and it's 15 pages long, 16 pages long, and it's distressing to read it to me, because these people, it wasn't a nightmare. They knew it wasn't a nightmare. They knew it was real. They knew that it was real, what was happening to them. They had died for one reason or another, fell off a cliff or poisoned or whatever. One man bitten by a snake, another man tried to kill himself. Here's the man one of the men who tried to kill himself. He jumps off a shed in his backyard. He's got a rope around his neck, and that the rope then it would break his neck, and so he would die instantly. He had forgotten that he had left a stool or a chair down below, and so he hits that, and it breaks his fall, and now he's hanging there. He can't get back up. He can't get down, and the life is being choked out of him. And here's what he says. This is in this article, Near-Death Experiences, is that these evil things come up, and they're laughing at him because he's an atheist. I'm sorry, that's part of it. He's an atheist. He knows there's no God. He knows there's no God. You're making that stuff up. You can't prove there's a God to me. God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Ask, seek, knock. That's what Jesus said. It is our responsibility to seek, not God's responsibility to prove himself to you. Please, my future friends. I want some smart people to talk to in heaven. If you're a hardcore atheist or hardcore skeptic, would you please study the Bible, read the book of John in the New Testament, please, and say, God, if you're alive, would you speak to me through the words of this book, okay? Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. Please read John. It would only take you a few evenings. Please. I want some smart people to talk to in heaven. Okay, I'm interrupting my story. I do that. Okay. So he's hanging there, and these creatures, these evil creatures, are now laughing at him because they got him. He believed them. He believed their deceptions. Well, the way he describes it, now he was an atheist, his wife was a Christian, and is that he leaves his body, okay, his soul, his spirit, his essence, whatever it is, his karma, leaves his body, runs inside the house, and he's screaming at his wife to try to get her attention. She doesn't even notice him, doesn't realize. And he's like, right, but it's not his body, it's not him physically, it's his essence, you could say, screaming, trying to get her attention. Finally, he actually goes where he's like inside her, okay, in a full physical sense, as a ghost or as a familiar spirit, unclean spirit would be. And he's just screaming, trying to get her attention. And finally, at some point, she goes, oh my God. And she goes running out in the backyard, sees him hanging there, is able to cut him down, and he recovers and stuff. And he tells the story of what happened. That's weird. There's all these different stories. One man who dies I think he was American, he dies on an operating table, or on a table waiting for an operation that was in Spain. And these spirits come to, or he's laying there, but then he gets up out of his body, and he can see his body there, which is weird. And then there's someone at the door saying, hey, come over here. Come on over here. And he doesn't want to leave, but he thinks that's where he needs to go. He starts following them, and they go down this long thing. There's all these beings who are there. I'm sorry, I need to not tell you all these stories. My episodes are way too long. You can read it for yourself. Anyway, he doesn't know his way back. And they tear at him. At a certain point, when he says he wants to go back and stuff, they tear into him, mock him, belittle him. They sexually violate him in every way possible. And they leave him, he's just exhausted. He cannot, by the time they're done defiling and destroying him. But at one point then he, in his desperation, so he again was an atheist, because he's too smart for those religious people. But as a child, he had gone to church, or his parents had taken him to church. And he finally says, he starts saying things like, God bless America. Okay? And these creatures didn't like that. They did not like that. God bless. Isn't that funny? That's a minor thing. God bless America, I would think. But they didn't like that. Any call to God was something they didn't like. And finally he says, Jesus, save me. Excuse me. And then he sees far, far, far away. I believe, if I recall correctly, above him is this little tiny light. And these angels come down and surround him. And they take him out of there. Now, isn't that a weird story? And then he came back. He came back to his body. Okay, so what do you do with a story like that? I don't know what to. That's hard to. Anyway, okay. Read about it, particularly if you're a hardcore skeptic. There's no God. You can't prove there's God to me. You're right, I can't. You can decide to be chaff, C-H-A-F-F, chaff, the wheat and the chaff. You can decide. You have free will to decide in this life. Are you going to study and learn God's word, or are you going to believe one of Satan's many, many deceptions out there? Maybe you're going to seek money above all things. I know, I'll get rich. I'll be successful. Like the bull, right? I used this in a previous episode. I won't unfold this whole thing. Ole! This is money. Can you see that? It's dollar bills. Ole! The bull's never been there before. The bull doesn't know. Everyone in the stands. Okay, so in a bullfight, all the people in the stands have been there before. Went to the bullfights in Mexico City when I was down there many years ago. The bull comes charging in, and here's a matador they start out with the, I guess, junior matadors with the pink capes. And then they tire out the bull. He goes chasing after it. And he spends all his energy trying to get. But each time he's getting nothing. It's an illusion. And then the real matador comes out in his costume, and everyone applauds, particularly if he's a famous matador, and he's got the big red cape. Ole! Ole! And again, he's doing this, and pretty soon they're stabbing into the bull and trying to kill him. We are like that. We have not been in this life before. We have not been here before. So many deceptions. I made lots of money. I am successful. You did what? You chased after what? Ole! And here they are in the stands. The demons, the demonic powers, the watchers, the evil spirits. You know what they're doing in the stands right now? Well, you're saying, I have $500 million. I'm so successful. Ole! You know what they're doing in the stands? Look at the human! Look at this guy. Look at him chasing the money. He can't control his own heartbeat, and he thinks he's successful. Okay. I've mocked rich people enough. The Bible does not say money is the root of all evil. It says the love of money. I'll put that up here. The love of money. When you think money is the goal, money is an excellent tool. You need it. You got to have it. Particularly if you get hungry sometimes like I do. Yes, gots to have it. You need money. Okay, I stayed way off subject. Where did I go here? Okay. I need to finish this up. I'm sorry I talked too long. I hope that these are helpful. Please, my friends, we are player. We didn't ask to be born. I didn't. As far as I know, I didn't ask to be born. As far as I know, as far as I remember crying a lot. No, I'm sorry, I'm making that part up. Okay, so let's see. I try not to cry too much, particularly not on camera. So I apologize for that. Okay. Now, a second near-death experience article, okay, is Census of Non-Western Near-Death Experiences to 2005. Overview of the current data. Okay, this is by a man out of England, out of the UK, a sociology professor in Bath, UK, B-A-T-H. He's a University of Bath. He seems to be pretty prominent in the field. He's a sociologist, but he seems to be well known in the near-death experiences, NDE literature. Okay, I'll put the whole title up here so you can find it. And this is, again, it's a long journal-type article, pages 249, summer of 2008. Pages 249 to 265, again about 16, 17 pages. So not a book, but the equivalent of a chapter, a good-sized chapter book. All kinds of things from India, from China, from other places. What's in common, what's unique? Because there's lots of them out there. Okay, I want to mention a couple. So that's in Western literature, the near-death experiences, Eastern literature. There was also a book I read a year or so ago. I got to find the title. I should have looked it up. Bad Buddha, something like that. This woman, and she was into Eastern religions, and she dies. And basically these evil spirits are trying to convince her she never actually lived. And they're confusing her and stuff like that. But anyway, she comes back to life. Excuse me. I'll try and find the title of that book. Anyway, okay, so now, Matthew 11:25 in the Bible. This is a very interesting verse. I just find this very interesting because atheists, my experience with I spoke to multiple atheist groups when I lived in California, in Berkeley specifically. Atheists from San Francisco, from Berkeley, there's like seven major or regularly meeting atheist groups in California. And I spoke to people from probably about four of the groups, trying to reason with them. Who are we? What are we? Why are we? And we are our smartest people, our smartest humans, I would contend. They're smarter than me, but our smartest people are still below the angelic realm, are still below these powerful spirit beings who can see us and toy with us. Okay? And unfortunately for us, we can't see, well, fortunately or unfortunately, we can't see them. We interact with them in a limited way. But the smartest humans go, I don't see no God out there. He must not exist. He, she, it, or they. Or they look at standard Christian theology, which I'm going to talk about in a minute here, and they'll go, that doesn't match up with the reality around us. Okay, I need to finish this. I ramble too much. Okay, Matthew 11:25. At that time Jesus answered and said, I thank you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, because you have hidden these things from the wise and prudent and revealed them to babes. That's just a very interesting thing. Some of the smartest people on earth are not religious. They're missing the most important part of life, I would contend. They may be smart in some ways, but that's not what God doesn't need. Our intelligence. He doesn't need our good looks. He doesn't need our physical strength. What he appears to want from us is character development. Wisdom is the principal thing. Develop wisdom. okay, and then gentleness, kindness, patience, long-suffering, these qualities, character qualities. That's what, and we're, this time on earth is a temporary time of learning and testing, I would contend. This is not life. Now, Plato's Republic ends in Book 10. That's the last of the Plato's Republic. And excuse me, ends with a story called The Myth of Ur, E-R, The Myth of Ur, or The Legend of Ur. I'm going to make this brief. This man was in a battle. He dies. He dies in battle, and he's dead. 10 days later, they're collecting the bodies to burn them, to kill them. His body was undeteriorated. The other ones deteriorate pretty fast. Rigor mortis sets in, all kinds of other things. And 2 days later, he's been taken back to his town or village. They've got him on a funeral pyre. They're going to set it on fire. And he awakens. He comes back to life. Fortunately, it was before they burned him. I'm sorry. Okay, yeah. Otherwise, you smell smoke? Ow, let me out of here. Okay, so this is over 2,000 years ago. He tells an interesting tale of where he has been. It's in Book 10 of the Republic. You can look it up. He traveled with all these other beings. They're before judges. There's 2 gates or 2 entrances above to get to paradise or to heaven, nirvana or whatever you want to call it. But there's also 2 gates to go down to hell. And those who are evil, those who are self-centered, those who are it's all about me, mine. We never got past that. Okay, well, and there are the different criminals and things like that go down. They're going to suffer. Okay, but those who sought justice and virtue, were able to go up. Okay, now that's odd. And many of them were reincarnated at the very end. Okay, so this is a very interesting story. I wouldn't build doctrine from it. But this has stood the test of time. It's been there for over 2,000 years, the myth of Ur. And it's in Plato, the end. That's how he ends Plato's Republic. So, what is the reality around us? Well, part of it appears to be that there's a spiritual world. Okay, now, Acts 17. This is where St. Paul goes to Athens, and he's trying to reason with the philosophers there on Mars Hill in Athens. And he quotes a couple of Greek poets. Now, I above quote all kinds of different words of wisdom and sayings, proverbs from around the world. I believe that's in keeping with things I see in the Bible, because St. Paul, when he's trying to reach the Athenians with wisdom, he uses wisdom from some of their own poets to try to reason with them for the sake of the gospel. Okay? So I would contend I'm being consistent in that way. But there's something very interesting that he says. Acts 17:30, and the times of former ignorance, the times of this ignorance God winked at, but now commands all men everywhere to repent. What does that mean? The former times that God winked at. One of the questions in Christian theology is, what about the people who have never heard the gospel? And there's different answers people try to give. Well, this is a unique verse in the Bible that says the former times that God winked at. There's a lot more that I could mention on this. I don't want to, but I believe that God is just. I believe this is a time of testing. I believe that you and I decide much of what we're going to do, how we're going to treat others. Are you going to cheat a little bit to get ahead? Are you going to, scam the system? What are you trying to do? Are you trying to get? Or are you trying to give? Are you trying to learn and then teach others? Okay, I want to contrast. I need to finish this up. I talk way too long. I hope these are interesting. Maybe I need to break this up. Episode 11, I broke it into 4 parts, trying to make it more bite-size for people. Maybe I'll have to break this one up too. Okay, let me contrast Plato's Cave, okay, book 7 in here, which I spent some time on, with a reality I'm going to call Mountain Lion Ravine. Okay, Mountain Lion Ravine. I wrote this out. I hope it kind of makes sense. Okay. A ravine is usually narrow with steep sides without a valley floor. So it's kind of like a valley, except it's a ravine and often with very steep sides or a narrow floor. In this mountain Lion Ravine, there's only one way in or out, so at the far end, as I propose it. And the sides of the ravine are too steep to climb. The inhabitants were born and lived there. They sometimes seek a way out, but there's only one way, down near the far end. But there's a fierce mountain lion there, okay? So you can't just walk out. There's a mountain lion, mountain lion or lions guarding the area or looking for something to eat. Hungry and fast, it consumes those who try to leave. The only way, this is what the elders say, the only way that's known of to escape and get past the mountain lions is to carry some kind of a sacrifice or an offering. Carry a sheep or carry something. It has to be big enough. You can't just carry a mouse. You better carry something of substance with you. To carry a sheep or other animal, throw it at the mountain lion, and then escape while it goes after the alternate food. In other words, it eats the sheep or other large animal rather than you. Okay? Off in the distance, way outside the ravine, out in the distance, we can see a few persons who have escaped. Hey, isn't that Joe? He used to be here. He made it. Look at his house now. Look at that garden he's got. They can see off in the distance. Okay, those who have escaped, so they know it's possible. They appear to have nice homes and colorful, lush gardens out there. But they cannot come back. They cannot come back to ravine. And for us, for the people in the ravine, mountain lion ravine, getting a good enough sacrifice is essential in preparing for escape from the ravine. The way is steep. You may fall. You could trip. The rocks may give way beneath your feet. The path to life, the way out, is narrow. Okay, so this is my little story here. This is not fair. Some mountain lion out there who just consumes anybody who tries to get out. That's not fair. I agree. That is unfair. And I want to use this as a kind of a loose allegory for this life. Jesus gives a couple of parables where he talks about one of them. One man is given 10 talents, another 5, another 2. A different similar example. One man has 5 talents, one has, the master gives to them, and one has 5, one has 2, one has 1. And we see 2 good servants in each of those examples, and then 1 wicked servant. The wicked servant says, I knew you were a hard man. I knew you wanted things that weren't yours. And he says, okay, that's it for you. Give what he had to one of the ones who did invest and did grow my kingdom. But it's not fair that someone only has 2 talents or someone only has 1 talent. It's not fair, right? That's true in this life. Some people are bigger or stronger or smarter, better looking. Tall people tend to have more advantages in life, right? That's not fair. Nationality. If someone's a citizen of one country, that may give them more opportunities or more rights than someone of another country, right? That's not fair. St. Paul, in the book of Acts, at one point, he's being persecuted, and he points out, I am a Roman citizen. And he has like 200 Roman soldiers guarding him. He's a citizen. He's a Roman citizen. Hands off. Okay? Today in the world, what has been, although America is falling at this time, as I mentioned, the Nazis and the rhinos are going to be taking over very soon. There's no coming back. There's no coming back once that completes, once that takeover is complete. But what has happened is you could travel the world. You could go just about anywhere without getting a visa ahead of time. That's changing now in the world. And as I have mentioned in previous episodes, well, one thing I mentioned is I get off on tangents. If you don't have a passport, just get one. Apply for it. It's $100 or more. No matter what country you're in, have the ability to travel. Get it now. Our world is starting to close down. You probably don't know about how much China is hemorrhaging. What's happening in China is, it's not in the Western news, but it's, oh my goodness, what is happening in China. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm getting off topic. Here's an interesting book, Nomad Capitalist. Andrew Henderson, I've recommended him before. He talks about it, and I've lived in other countries. I've lived overseas. I lived in Europe, I lived in Japan. I told you that. Just get some flexibility because our world is changing quickly. I got off topic. I do that. Okay, now, modern Christian theology. Oh, actually, let me jump back to 2,000 years ago. When Jesus chose his 12 disciples, not a single one was a trained rabbi. Why? Why do you think that is? I think part of it is because the rabbinical training had gotten so far off of what the Bible was teaching. What they were training people was training them into a certain way of thinking that was separate from what the Bible taught. Well, I think now, 2,000 years later, we are in a similar case. So many seminaries are compromising the Bible. They're teaching a certain way of thinking that is not biblical. It's not following the Bible. They're compromising the Bible right and left. This is happening in many denominations. In the last episode, episode 11, How to Become a Satan Worshiper, I mentioned the 8 seminaries, cemeteries with an S, cemeteries, spiritually killing people. The 8 seminaries that are part of the GTU, Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley. I never met a single saved professor in any of those 8 seminaries. And if they're not saved, if they don't know the Lord, how can they be teaching proper Christian doctrines? One of my letters, I would write to them once or twice a year. I'd invite them to events or offer them free DVDs and stuff. One of my letters started with, "Who is on the Lord's side?" I consider that a very provocative statement. Who is on the Lord's side? And I get no positive responses. We're talking hundreds of, over 100 professors between the 8 seminaries. You can look it up, GTU. Anyways, 3 Catholic, 3 Protestant, Unitarian, and Pacific School of Religion. Okay. In modern Christian theology, God is omnipresent, God is omnipotent, God is perfect without error, and things like that. That is standard Christian theology. I'm a guy who's not very smart. Are people picking up rocks to throw them at me right now? I don't want to open my eyes and look. Okay, there's several things in the Bible. In the book of Genesis, we see God saying he repented that he made man on the earth. What? He changed his mind? He repented? That's what repent means, to change your direction, to change your mind, to change your course, to repent. Repent of something. God repented that he made man on the face of the earth? Why are we encouraged to pray? Doesn't God already know everything? If he already knows everything, why should we pray? And if our perspective is so limited and so little, why is that important? Why is that important at all? Moses and Abraham, we see other examples in Scripture. Abraham, when the 3 powerful spiritual beings come to him and they tell him they're going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. And Abraham pleads that. And he says, if you find 50 righteous men, will you still destroy Sodom and Gomorrah? No. If you find 45, if you find 40, he keeps bringing them down. Why was that important, what Abraham believed? Right? He's a man just like you or me, a man or a woman, just like you or me, a man or a woman. And Moses also, he's praying to God. This is just very interesting that our prayers have an effect on the eternal counsels of God. I just find it so interesting. Okay, so now, if God already knows everything, if he's omnipotent and omnipresent, there's some scriptures which Christians believe. There's some scriptures which appear to disagree with that. Isaiah 45, I need to do that one after a couple of these here. Matthew 18:10. This is Jesus talking. Take heed for children, take heed that you despise not one of these little ones. Children. Okay, and specifically, for I say to you that in heaven their angels do always behold the face of my Father, which is in heaven. So if you abuse a child, oh my goodness, do you know what's going to happen? You purposely hurt a child, take advantage of their weakness, take advantage of them when they're young, or abuse a child. Take heed that you do not despise one another, because in heaven the angels do always behold the face of my Father, which is in heaven. What is that about? Wait a minute. Our Father who art in heaven, not here, not omnipresent, not omnipresent, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, right? Holy is your name, okay? That appears to indicate he's not everywhere all at once, doesn't it? Now, Christian theology teaches that modern Christian theology. Maybe the Christians are wrong. The Jews were wrong 2,000 years ago. Matthew chapter 23, I mentioned this before. This is where Jesus just lays into the Pharisees. Scribes, Pharisees, hypocrites. Scribes, Pharisees, hypocrites. Scribes, Pharisees, hypocrites. The religious leaders at that time had become so corrupt that they were no longer teaching Judaism. And they rejected the Messiah. Okay, let me jump to two other scriptures here. Genesis 11:5. This is at the Tower of Babel. Genesis chapter 11, verse 5. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of men built. What? The Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of men built. That's interesting. Okay, there's one other verse I want to mention, and this one is going to get me. The Christians are going to hate this. Pastors hate. They know it's there. They know it's in the Bible. They never teach it. I've never heard a sermon on this. Now, I've talked about it. I taught at a Bible college. Okay, so maybe I'm feeling kind of different. I feel kind of different. Okay, this is a verse that's in the Bible. You can look it up. Look it up in the original Hebrew. Isaiah 45:7. So Isaiah 45 is written 100 years before Cyrus was born by the prophet Isaiah. So it's prophetic that this future leader would come about 100 years later, Cyrus. And it describes his career. And it's Cyrus, this man who would come, 3 or 4 generations later. And it talks about him, and God calls him mine anointed. This man didn't know who the God of Israel is, and yet God calls him mine anointed. There's several things about this chapter that are very interesting. I also want to mention that there's some Christians who in the modern world who have looked at Donald Trump, a very ungodly man in so many ways, but they've looked at him as a kind of Cyrus. He's not a godly man, and yet God's anointed. This is what some people have contended. Okay, I'm mentioning that. Anyway, there's a very interesting verse that is the only one in the whole Bible that I know of, Isaiah 45:7, that mentions a particular thing. Isaiah 45, verse 7. I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things. God creates evil? Because many people say, this is a common question, where did evil come from? And if God's perfect, why is there any evil at all? Well, this verse, it's the only one I know of in the Bible, in my studies. And when I've mentioned this, Christian leaders get very upset. They'll get because if they know about it, often they don't know about it. What are you talking about? That's not in the Bible. That's not there. Yeah, yes, it is. I create evil. That's what it says. Okay, so now a lot more I could talk about, but I talk way too long. I need to finish this. There's a few things. I need to give a prayer. I want you to either ignore my prayer or pray with me. Or wait a minute, or amen at the end, okay? And I'll put the words right here. I want to pray, and then I want to do a couple other things. God in heaven, there's so much I don't know. Help me to reflect your truths accurately. I pray that I'm reaching souls, Lord, people created in your image, but we've fallen so far. We're in a time of growing craziness in the world, of materialism, of losing track of the most important part of life, the spiritual. Help me to save a few others. Help me to bring a few others to you. I pray for wisdom. I pray for protection from deceptions. I thank you for your many blessings. We see miracles every day. Every time we see a flower open, we see a bumblebee go by, or a honeybee. What a miracle. How incredible. Yet we've gotten used to it, and we think that it's natural and it happens all by itself. Well, some people do. Some smart people think that. Help us. Help those who are willing, Lord, to read the Gospel of John, to come to know you. Thank you for your many blessings. In the Messiah's name I pray. Amen. So, I also want to mention from Famous Monsters of Filmland, I mentioned that I met Forrest Ackerman. This is a magazine, well-known magazine that's out there. These are in plastic because they're kind of collector's items. So I have 2 cartoons I want to show you, and hopefully they're funny. Forrest Ackerman, Uncle Forey. I got to visit his house one time in Hollywood, his second mansion, the Acker Mansion. Ackerman's his last name. He always loved puns and jokes on monsters and things, and he had them just filling his magazine, all kinds of funny stuff. Anyway, so I hope that's funny for you, that you find this entertaining. Also, Norman Rockwell is afterwards, a classic American car. Okay, now. Actually, no. I showed you this book last time in episode 11, American Cars. I decided to go a different direction. The most successful automobile in our history of the world is the Volkswagen Beetle. So I think that's what I want to emphasize. It was developed in the 1930s. The original early sketches, that kind of car were from 1925. The Daimler-Benz people, Mercedes-Benz people, make that claim that they had the early designs. But the design of the car was Dr. Ferdinand Porsche, P-O-R-S-C-H-E, later of Porsche Automobiles. But in the early 1930s, Adolf Hitler had taken over, and he wanted a people's car. Volks, car, wagon. Volkswagen, the people's car, as kind of Germany's answer to the Model T. The Model T was so successful in America, the Ford Model T. They were everywhere, produced for a lot of years. Anyway, the Volkswagen Beetle then, starting in the 1930s, but then interrupted during the war years. But it's the most, I think it was over 20 million, 22 million, something like that. Of the Volkswagen Beetle was sold on virtually every continent, everywhere in the world, every continent people are on. So maybe there were none in Antarctica, but every other continent, the Volkswagen Beetle, bring, rear engine, air cooled, which kind of means oil cooled engine, just a sturdy little good car, 2-door. They made two versions, the 2-door coupe, you could say, and the 2-door, they had made a convertible and stuff. But it was being made, I think, in the United States, they ended in the late 70s, 78 or 79. Stopped production in the United States. But they were still making it in Brazil until, I think, 1996, I think. I mean, isn't that amazing that this design for over 60 years stood the test of time? So the Volkswagen Beetle, I'll find some pictures, I'll put them online for you. Okay, then Norman excuse me, I also want to mention, I'm not in the right order today, excuse me. Okay, here's my things. I want to mention again Paul Harvey and TROTS, The Rest of the Story. Take a look, take a listen to a couple of these, The Rest of the Story. This is just good history. It's maybe not real deep or something, but it kind of shows you in the human experience things, someone who had a horrible problem or to overcome, and then you realize that, oh my goodness, that happened to this famous person, and they still made it. It gives us hope. These are good things. Okay, then Norman Rockwell. Okay, this painting. So he was a painter from around World War I era. So we're talking about 1915 till the late 1960s, if I recall, going into the 70s. And he made paintings that were so emblematic of how America saw itself at that time. A very white-centric world that was modern, with modern things, but yet still rooted in very human things. And this is one called Saying Grace. Okay? And last time I found a copy of on WikiArt, and so I'm going to look again to see if it's online, because I don't want to violate their copyright, get myself in lots of trouble. But in Saying Grace, you see the grandmother and the grandchild saying grace while the two young teenage guys are kind of looking at him, and one's got a cigarette. Let's see, one of them or both of them? Yeah, one of them's got a cigarette hanging out of his mouth and just kind of looking at him like, what are they doing, kind of? And the play of light and dark, it's a good representation from 1951, okay, 1951, Saying Grace. It's one of the best known of Norman Rockwell's paintings. He made hundreds of paintings. And it shows a contrast in society of the people who are too smart to thank God for things. Excuse me, I am sorry, I'm laughing at skeptics and stuff. Anyway, we need to be thankful Food. I'll tell you what, down in human history, famines, we could be going into one soon in the world today, and I don't want to get into that. Okay, I'm going to end this with another Universal newsreel. These were released, Universal, just like Fox and others, did newsreels in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and they would go around the world and show images, and these would be played in the theaters. Universal's made these available, basically public domain. And so I hope that you like this. That's how I'm going to end it. Thank you for watching this. I hope it is interesting. Folks, we are spiritual beings. We're in a temporary physical incarnation. This time on earth is not life. Your position here, how much money you have, the titles you've accumulated, the medals or whatever, all these different things, these are just temporary. It is God that we have to answer to ultimately. The Bible tells us it is better to fear God than men. And we need to be first responsible to our Creator. That's why I'm doing this Give Life series, is trying to hopefully impart wisdom to you of things that myself and many, many others down through time have learned. The Bible is not just a collection of stories by these shepherds. I need to do that. Maybe that'll be next episode. The Holy Bible and God's plan of salvation. Maybe I'll focus on that for episode 13. Lucky 13. Thank you for watching. God bless you. Goodbye.
At the United Nations, the Security Council debate on Soviet charges of American aggression ends with a sharp final clash between Gromyko and Lodge. Ambassador Lodge counters repeated denials of Soviet spy activities with a concrete and dramatic example. He tells how the Soviet planted a listening device in America's Moscow embassy, concealed inside a wooden carving of the Great Seal, presented as a gift by the Russians.
Go ahead, open it up. And here is the clandestine listening device. You can see the antenna in the aerial, and it was right under the beak of the eagle. I might add that it's really quite an interesting device.
The actual vote on Russia's move to censor the United States for the U-2 incident follows, with a 7-2 vote in favor of America. Only Poland sides with the Soviet. Russia now threatens to take its charges to the General Assembly, thus getting the maximum propaganda mileage from the incident of the shot-down reconnaissance plane. Meanwhile, the Council moves on to consider a resolution calling for the Big Four to resume their top-level conference.